Welcome to the Worth Listening podcast, where we focus on having positive and productive conversations around money. I'm your host, Lauren, a four-time Olympian and certified financial planner. On this show, my guests share their money stories. Everyone has a unique story and experiences both wins and losses when it comes to money. My intent is to give listeners something they can relate to, something that builds their courage to be open and take control of their own money story. When I'm not creating a great show for my listeners, I'm running my company, Worth Winning, where I help individuals and families organize their finances. Check us out at worth-winning.com. All right, now on with the show. We are getting ready to leave another year behind. And I'm not big on New Year's resolutions, but I am a believer in goal setting and making the changes you need in order to be in a better place this time next year. Most of the time, these changes come with an investment of your time, your money, or both. But you first have to be willing to invest to reap the benefits of the investment. If you want to change your finances in 2019, don't try to do it alone. Get a group of friends together, get a financial professional in the room, and get real about helping each other excel. Friends don't let friends have effed up finances. I'm ready to help you and your friends make some money moves. Learn more at worth-winning.com. Today, I'm really excited to have Claudia Steer here to share her money memoir with us. Claudia has 10 years of experience developing creative strategies for some of the largest brands in the world, including McDonald's, Coke Zero, Burger King, and New Balance. However, she is a creative at heart, and the corporate world just wasn't doing it for her. She recently quit her job and is now building a freelance career and is also working to expand into the world of interior design. What I love about the conversation you're getting ready to hear is just how transparent Claudia is about her finances. She's not worried about stretching the truth and trying to impress you. She does exactly what we need to do with our financial conversations. Get real and tell it how it is. Claudia shares what it was like growing up in the projects of London and what the transition was like when she moved to the States. She's really open about how long it took her to figure out her finances. She's not afraid to share what many people are living through, but pretending like they aren't. This episode is everything. I mean, I could not think of a better way to finish out the year. Let's listen to Claudia share her money memoir. Claudia, thanks so much for coming on my show.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm super excited about it. Super excited.
We go way, way back, and it's always awesome to catch up with people I haven't seen or heard from in a while.
Yeah, it's really, really good to reconnect. I mean, I feel like we knew each other from several lifetimes ago. I'm sure we've grown since then, so I'm excited to chat with you.
Can't wait to tell everyone your story. All right. So speaking of several lifetimes ago, let's just kind of start at the beginning. So tell us where you're from, what kind of influences you saw around money growing up, and fill in the gaps of who is Claudia?
Okay. Oh my, how much time we have? So I was born and raised in London, England. I know you can't hear it, but that is the case. I moved to Brooklyn, New York when I was about 14-ish. And that will get rid of an accent very quickly, going to school in Brooklyn. But going back a little bit, in England, I grew up with my grandmother. I wasn't raised by my parents. And grandma was really tight with the funds. Growing up, it was an environment of scarcity when it comes to money. I do come from a big family. My mom is one of 9. And so what I remember observing is that there were definitely have and have nots within the family. And so I would go to my cousin's house and they had everything, and she had all the cool toys and all the cool stuff and lived in a beautiful home and had their own bedrooms. And then I'd go to a different cousin and it was a bit more working class. And then where my grandma lived, it's just the equivalent of projects. They call them housing estates in England. And that's where my brother and I grew up.
Very fancy housing estates. I love that.
Yes, housing estates. It sounds fancy, but it's a project. That's what they are. But yeah, so that's kind of my first recollection of, even though I wasn't really making the association as a kid, that means allowed for you to have different experiences. So I do remember that quite distinctly.
And thinking about grandma being a little bit tight, do you think that is a result of the generation, or is that funds were tight and so she was tight, or is it a little bit of both?
Yeah, I think it is a relationship. I think as an immigrant, my grandma's Jamaican, and then she moved to England as a part of the Windrush generation, right? So when they needed people to work in the factories, they pulled people from the islands to come and work over there. And I find what happens is that it just becomes a sort of, well, I've never had it, so now I have it, so I'm going to hold on to it really, really, really tight kind of mentality. I mean, my grandma, by the time we lived with her, she was being supported on social services on some capacity. So in retrospect, she probably didn't need to be as tight as she was. But that was kind of the mentality. It was a matter of saving it up just in case kind of thing, whether that was rational or not,
Right, right. So was there any allowance?
Yeah, not so much, really. I don't recall there being much of an allowance at all. Every so often, my mother would send money back to England for me to provide for me in some capacity. But no, I had an older brother. He'd give me a couple coins here and there. But in that regard, there was no sort of training as it related to money in my childhood, really.
And then your brother, how many years apart are you guys?
He's almost 10 years older than me.
Okay, so quite a bit older than.
Quite a bit, yeah.
So did you see any influences from him in how to handle money, or any examples that were set?
No. Not at all. My brother was into fashion and things like that. So any money he had, I believe it was spent on what young people buy, fashion, clothes, going out. So again, none of it was ever very overt. It was all kind of implied, but no, not really. Not much guidance there.
Gotcha. What about trips? Were there family trips or vacations or things like that?
So we were poor. So no.
No.
I mean, if the church wasn't going there, we didn't go there. So no, I didn't really vacation or anything like that as a child. No.
Cool. So when was the point that you felt like you first had financial responsibilities, or there was an opportunity for you to be able to earn income or kind of have some financial independence as it pertains to what you needed to do for yourself?
That's so interesting. Yeah, I think it wasn't until I got my first job. And that wasn't until I moved to the States. I think my first job was at Burger King.
So how old were you when you moved to the States?
I was about 14. Yeah. And it was about 15 or so when I got my first job, maybe 16.
What do you remember about that time period as it pertains to like, okay, I got my first paycheck, or I'm earning my own income. I work. This is my money.
Yeah.
Do you remember anything about your mindset at that time?
I do. So when I moved to the States, I didn't know my mom. Essentially, I moved in with a stranger. She left when I was 3, and I didn't see her again until I was 14, 15 years old. And by that, she'd married someone and they had kids. So it was just a mashup of families. And so in my head, I was an adult, and I was having to take instructions and be governed by someone I didn't know. And I remember not liking that at all. So having my independence early was a really big thing for me. So getting a job was really about sort of having the autonomy that I already felt I should have had at that age.
Right.
But the money then helped me sort of, again, not rely on my mother. I felt that she could have less say so if I wasn't dependent on her for money. So I do remember that being a big driver. I don't know if the West Indian, I'm sure we're all familiar with the Jamaican jokes about working hard and having many jobs. That might have been a little part of it too. I don't know.
A little bit in your DNA.
Yeah, just a little bit. But yeah, I do remember that being a big part of it.
Gotcha. Okay. And so then what were you thinking about going to college, or New York City? You didn't need a car. So I'm assuming you didn't get one of those at 16.
Yeah. My first job was really just about having money to spend and be a teenager, if I'm being honest. When it came to college, I had very little understanding of how the whole system worked here. And it really was just about where I always dreamed about going. And the money situation, it wasn't even a factor. I wanted to go to Duke from the time I was like 7 years old. And when I moved to the States, it was the only school I applied to, really. And I figured the money part would sort itself out
Ah,
miraculously. Part of it was my parents weren't very involved in the process. They also had absolutely no idea how this thing worked. Even the concept of loans and all that kind of stuff was completely new. So they were relying on me to drive the whole process. So I can't even say that I factored in expense when it came to making that decision.
so there was no conversation around it then, like, honey, it costs X number of dollars, or
Yeah.
it was just kind of like, well, you said you want to go. You better go to your counselor and figure out that paperwork.
And figure it out, essentially. Yeah. That was pretty much how that conversation went.
So what did happen then? Did you get into Duke? Did you go?
I did. Got in, and I remember I did early decision. And so I was pretty much coasting my second semester of school. And I do remember, again, the finance conversation coming up after the fact. My school wasn't very instrumental in applying for grants and scholarships. You know, the expectations for the students at the school I went to was pretty low. So the fact that I got in was kind of a miracle to everybody. And so it was like, oh crap, how are we going to pay for this thing? So I had missed the boat on a lot of the scholarships and stuff like that. So then the burden really relied on student loans, grants, and what my parents could provide.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So you had to finance pretty much the whole thing in some sort, form, or fashion.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Okay. So you made it to college and you got there, like you said, but look, maybe a wing and a prayer, but you made it there. And now what happens? Like you said, now you're outside of a household where, no one really is telling you what to do. At college, we always think we're a grown-up adult. We're over 18 for the most part.
Right.
What changed about the way you were thinking about finances, or what was happening in the managing of finances as a college student?
So I did have work study. So I worked all the way through college, whether on campus and then later on getting jobs off campus. But I don't know if my mentality around money shifted in terms of like my behaviors at all.
Mm-hmm.
It was a means to an end. It was a means to providing in the immediate what I needed. And I think that mentality stayed throughout most of college, if I'm going to be honest.
So very much in the moment.
In the moment. Yep. I need this to pay for my phone bill. I need this to pay for, it was just immediate needs.
Right. So you don't remember like frivolous purchases or YOLO kind of expenses, or like you said, staying fresh to death?
Well, a little. It's funny because that was the other thing. So it was that college opened my eyes to was just the sheer amount of wealth out there in the world. So growing up in Brooklyn, I mean, everyone was of essentially the same sort of class. So you weren't really privy to that. But going to Duke, I mean, the level of wealth that you get to see, I didn't even know people lived like that in real life. And then even with people of color, friends wearing Burberry stuff to class and driving in Benzes. And it was a whole new world.
Right.
So if anything, I became super conscious. And I think part of working all the time was being able to keep up appearances, if I'm being honest, whether that was making sure I had the right kicks and that kind of stuff, even if that meant I was ramen noodling it in the backdrop, that's what money became. It's just a matter of fitting in socially, I think, too.
Yeah, I think that's real, though. A lot of us have those social pressures of, you said, I don't want to be the one with the Payless shoes on.
Right.
Like you said,
exactly right.
I can't get the Mercedes, but I can look put together.
I can have Jordans.
Right.
So, yeah, that's how that went. Yeah.
What about discussions that were happening as it pertains to money with your peers? Was there conversation about it?
I don't recall there being tons of discussion about money in that regard. The only time you saw the stratification sort of manifest is whether it was spring breaks or who went home over breaks versus who didn't. It was all very nuanced, right? It
Right.
was like, oh, you're not going home for Thanksgiving? No, I'm just going to kind of hang out, It was like, okay. Or can I go to your house for Thanksgiving? Little stuff like that is when you started to get a sense that maybe there were money issues, but it was never something that was talked about socially. I'm even trying to think about later years, like junior, senior years, but I really don't remember it being much of a discussion at all.
Yeah. I mean, I think you bring up a really good point about where some of our behaviors come from and how like you said, oh, are you going home for Thanksgiving? Like, and how we kind of almost train ourselves to not tell what our situation is or not be open and honest about like, girl, I'm way too broke.
I don't have it. Right.
And how it manifests itself later in life when we kind of create those things in that moment, not really realizing that it's a thing and that it's going to play into our money behavior in the future.
Exactly. Exactly right.
Okay, so tell me what happens when you finish college. So what did you major in?
So I majored in Japanese and economics.
What were you planning to do with the major?
Yeah. Right. Again, more not quite thought out decisions, but that's okay. I wanted to go into international business.
Okay.
That was the plan. So Japanese, I was just infatuated with the culture. One thing that you'll know about me is that I tend to just follow passion, and hopefully that guides me to whatever's next. And I loved Japanese culture. I was just infatuated with it. And I was like, hey, if I'm going to struggle, I might as well struggle with something that I love. And so that's how the Japanese thing came about. My first job out of college, actually, I struggled to figure out what to do.
So were you applying for jobs in international Japanese something or other and there was like none to be found or?
None to be found. I didn't even know what was available to me. So Duke is a kind of place that, and it's changed a bit now, but then, it was very heavily, it's like you're either going to law school, you're going to business school, or you're going into consulting of some form or fashion and going to work on Wall Street. And if you're not in those tracks, good luck to you. That was pretty much my situation. So I had, over the course of college, taken internships like at some of the finance firms and consulting firms, and I just had zero interest. And so when came down to it, I really struggled. I was like, I don't know what to do. And they say, when you don't know, teach you, whatever it is that they say. And so that's what ended up being. I got a job in Japan and I figured, hey, why not? Let's try something new and go on a bit of an adventure.
So teaching English in Japan is what happened?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so at that point, it was less about the pressures of making a certain amount of money just hadn't come into play just yet. It was really about just trying to get a job.
Right.
Yeah, I wasn't really thinking about it so much then.
I've heard a lot about those jobs where you go and you teach English in a foreign country and it being a kind of a good gap year, if you will, after school for various people. Does it pay well or is it kind of like a more like college living?
You're getting paid just pennies. You're abroad, you have roommates. It's very much an extension of college, at least from a socioeconomic standpoint on many levels. And one thing I didn't know was how expensive Japan was. And I was very close to Tokyo. So again, it was almost as an extension of college in terms of quality of life.
Got it.
From that standpoint.
So cost of living is something else that didn't fall into consideration initially, or there was no conversations about that.
Exactly. A couple of things that helped me financially was I had lived off campus for the last 2 years of school. And so the responsibility of paying bills and all that stuff, I at least had some introduction to that. Being out on my own, that transition was a lot easier. But again, it was still a paycheck to paycheck, hand to mouth kind of situation. No savings, no, what about a rainy day? It was like it's very transactional. That was essentially still my relationship with money.
I think you bring up a really good point too about where a lot of us are ill-equipped is you go to college and if you do stay on campus all 4 years and someone else has figured out your financial aid and everything on your behalf, you think you're a grown-up because you're 18, but not really had any responsibility. And so now you're out of school. It's like you need to find somewhere to live. They need to check your credit to be able to live there. You need to pay that bill every month on time or be evicted. And so, it brings up a really good point that moving off campus is something that's relevant just to help you start getting ready for adulting.
Yeah. And it's funny, you brought up the subject of credit, which in college, I think I'd opened up a couple of cards. What Japan did allow me to do was completely neglect what was happening on the credit front in terms of my life, because it's a completely different system. There's no credit check or anything that transcends global borders, right? So I essentially got to start a different life over there without any sort of cognizance of what it meant to not pay bills on time. Like, I had absolutely no concept of what credit was or wasn't, outside of this one thing people checked every so often if you needed to open a phone line or something. I went through pretty much entire college without understanding the ramifications of credit, which is insane in retrospect.
And so in thinking about that, what was happening to student loans in this process? What happens when you travel abroad?
Yeah, I was able to defer. And so I did. And I deferred for a very, very long time.
Right.
But again, without the concept of understanding interest and how that stuff was accruing. At this point in my life, I was still quite illiterate financially, of understanding just how these things were playing out.
So when do you feel like that literacy came along? Or should we move to the next part of the story? Then you tell us that. Like,
last week?
Work in progress. Yes, girl. Don't worry. We meet everybody where they are.
It's weird. I think it might have been a few years down the road. So when I moved back to the States, and I had jumped around a little bit. And then when I was essentially trying to buy my first home.
All right. So you finished in Japan.
So I finished in Japan. I did about a year and a half, 15 months or something like that. Mm-hmm. Came back again, wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but sports was a passion. And while I was in Japan, I realized how much sport helped me navigate the cultural gap between my students and myself. I ended up becoming an assistant coach for a women's basketball team when I was out there. And it really helped make the experience more tolerable. So I knew sports was really important to me. So I ended up getting a job with the NBA and the WNBA. I got a bunch of different offers, and I ended up choosing to live in Phoenix, Arizona. Why? I don't know. New adventure, I guess. Right. And yeah, that was the next transition after Japan.
Okay, so now you're back in the States. You've got full-time gig. Are you thinking in that moment that this could be the thing forever and ever?
Yeah, the vision was to become the president of the WNBA.
Wow.
That was the vision. I was so amped. I wanted to work for the league forever. I really was amped, and sales was pretty much the foot in the door. It's one of those industries where you just have to work your way up. I'm sure you know how that goes, right? I got my foot in the door. The plan was to pretty much just work my way up the ranks.
Okay, so in thinking about literacy at this time, this is your first grown-up job in the U.S., out of school, et cetera. How did you navigate things like filling out paperwork for 401ks or whatever was available? And did you have kind of a little meltdown when you were thinking about like, oh my God, like what are they asking me on this paper?
To be totally honest, I did not even think about any of that stuff. The league in the sales capacity is commission-based. Mm-hmm. If you don't sell, you don't earn. And so
eat what you kill.
Pretty much. It felt extraneous.
Gotcha.
That's how that stuff felt at the time. It was like, I don't have time to give you more money that I'm not guaranteed to make every month. That's extra. I'm not there. And it really was just pushed aside just that quickly.
Do you think it also reinforced that scarcity mindset we talked about back in London? Because it's like, I don't know for sure what the next paycheck is going to be. So in that regard, I can't afford to put the money aside when I might need to spend it.
Got it. And even the concept of retiring, it's so far from your realm of where your mind's at when you're 21, 22. I was like, I'll figure out that later.
I know. I sure thought I was Superwoman at 21.
I was like, why am I thinking about that right now? That's not for me. That was exactly what it is. That's not for me. And so it was on to the next. It was just like, no, I'd rather keep all my money right now today. Thank you.
Okay, so you didn't end up working at the WNBA. So tell us what happened.
I worked for the league for probably about 3 years-ish. I moved to DC and then worked for the teams in DC. And it was while I was in DC, I decided that I hadn't given up on the dream, but I didn't have the education background to make it up the ranks between marketing. And so I decided I wanted to go back to school for a degree in marketing, again, to hopefully come back and, again, move up the ranks.
Okay, so let's pause there for a second. So you said you didn't have the education. How did you find out you didn't have an education? Was there someone bringing you along that said, yeah, girl, you're not going to do that without a master's degree? Or did you just feel like you needed more education?
I felt like it. I felt, and I still feel this way, that a lot of people don't understand the women's product. They don't understand women's basketball as a product. And it's treated very much like the ugly stepchild of the men's product. Again, I'm sure you can relate, right? Mm-hmm. And so they're applying the rules that they apply to the men's product, to the women's product, and then frustrated when they don't get the results that they want.
When in fact, they're in two entirely different things.
And they're just different products. And so it was very frustrating to me because I would have all these ideas on ways to sort of market it that might be different from what they were doing. But I had no audience because I had no credibility in people's minds. And so I was very, very frustrated about it. And I had lots of friends that played in the league, and I just felt like I could be doing more, but I needed the credentials. So that was probably more governed by me than someone actually overtly telling me so. But that's just how I felt.
So you went back to school, yeah?
I did.
More student loans?
More student loans. And, grad school is pretty much all student loans. That was that.
Okay. And then what happens?
But I did work while I was in grad school.
Okay.
So I became a teacher. I'm a product of the public school system, and I wanted to be able to give back. So I decided to become an English teacher. And so I taught high school English in DC while I was in grad school.
So did you try anything for public service loan forgiveness at that time?
So that was the vision, but you have to do, I think it might be 10 years of service before they do that. And I think I got to about 3.
Okay. And you're like, yeah, I'm not about this life.
I don't think I can make it. So that's what happened. But it was definitely something I was aware of and wanted to take advantage of, but my heart wasn't in it.
That's great, though. I mean, you were doing some investigative research at the time, because the other option is put everything in deferment again because I'm getting my master's degree. But your brain had cut on to this idea of, okay, I got to figure the student loan thing out at some point. And what are my options? And you did stumble upon the public service loan forgiveness, which a lot of people don't do. They're just like, forbearance, I don't have time to think about it, or I don't want to think about it. And then you miss an opportunity to be able to possibly get some credit toward those things. So that's awesome. Yeah.
To be totally honest, I still think I was in the forbearance, hey, I'll deal with this later mentality when it came to student loans. At this point, and especially when I started the home purchase process, the idea of good debt started to become something I was aware of. And student loan was always talked about as good debt. Right?
Because you're investing in yourself, right?
You're investing. And, as long as you pay your minimum payment on time, don't worry about it. People, it's not a detriment to you. It's good debt. So that's how I was always looking at it.
So do you still think it's good debt?
No, I am actually on a path to pay this off as soon as humanly possible. It is the top thing on my list right now. In the next 12 to 18 months, I'm trying to be done.
Hey.
Yeah, I opened my eyes to what that really is. And I'm very aggressive.
Where do you think the whole good debt, bad debt thing came from? Or was that like conversations over drinks with friends or blogs you were reading? Like, where was your information starting to come from that was shaping the different things you were learning about finances kind of in this time period?
At this point, I think the home buying process is what opened my eyes to a lot of things, right? Because they pretty much expose your whole insides in order to be able to buy a home. And then you become aware of how you're being evaluated in the eyes of these other entities. And I wasn't really aware. And so it was like, oh, crap. I mean, at this point, I'm in grad school. And so my debt is probably looking at about $50,000, $60,000 at this point. And I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to buy a home? I have all this debt. Realtors like, oh, don't worry about that. That's student loans. You don't have to worry about that. It was like, oh, okay. It was like, oh, it's something that, are you paying it on time? Wonderful. You don't have to worry about paying more than the minimum. It was literally like, oh, okay, you're paying it. Great. It's good debt. Don't worry about it.
Right. Because the realtors just try to get their commission. Like, as long as you qualify, I don't really care about your student loan life. Like,
exactly right. Nor the implications of what it means to actually be house poor when you actually buy a home, which is exactly the situation that I ended up in.
All right. So tell us what happened then. So you did get a home.
I did. I ended up buying it with a friend. We thought, hey, you're 25, you've got a job. This is what we're supposed to do, right? You graduate from college, you get a job. Next thing to check off the bucket list is to buy a home.
Hashtag adulting. Right?
Adulting. Hey, and at 25, you think you're winning. We were winning, okay? Because we had property. Wonderful. Good job. And then we bought at the height of the market. We bought in 2007 and the market crashed in 2008.
Girl, I did too. I actually bought in 2006. So
Right. And so it was like, oh, then this introduced, again, more financial vernacular. Weren't really privy to understanding the kind of loan that we got. It was like, hey, all we want to do is keep the payments as low as possible. We're on teacher salaries. This is as low as possible. Oh, sure, we could make this work. We could just jigger if you just sign here. Really not privy to what was happening. We ended up getting a really bad loan. It's called a 1030, 30-10, something like this, but it's essentially 10 years interest only. Right?
Yeah.
And then it balloons after that, right? And it's not adjustable rate.
Like, just kidding. Now you owe us, double as a monthly payment.
Exactly right. Yeah. But the thinking was, oh, by the time you're 35, you'll be making way more money. So you'll be totally fine. Don't worry about it. You'll have more than enough money by that time to pay whatever the mortgage ends up being. Yeah, so then that happens, and then you buy a home, but don't realize you've got to actually furnish a home. And that also costs a crap load of money.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's actually, you got to heat the home and pay the water and this, and then maintenance, and then condo association. And this whole world of finances beyond the mortgage payment comes into purview. And you're like, oh my God, what have I done? In addition to my student loans.
Right.
Right.
No, that's real though. Like you said, we get caught up in the fairy tale of home ownership is the next thing. And once again, like good debt or a home is an asset. And we don't really think about what our values and our goals are. And how does this really play into the picture?
Exactly.
Are we doing it because everybody else says we should? And it's the next, like you said, the next step in adulting? Or does this really make financial sense for us right now?
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. That ended up being a very steep learning curve. And then when the market crashed, and then the idea of being bottoms up in your loan or whatever the term is, I was like, oh, okay, houses can devalue. Oh, it means it's worth less than what I paid.
Upside down, right?
Oh, upside down. I was like, oh, that's a thing. Oh, okay.
Right.
But this is an investment.
Like, oh, hey, house that I paid double for that I can only sell for half of. Yeah, wait a minute.
We had that house and we lived in it for a while. And then it just became really expensive to live on it on teacher salaries. So then it became a matter of, okay, well, let's try to rent it. But then you learn that what market value is for rent and how that relates to what your mortgage is. And for a really long time, we were taking in less money than what we were paying out on the home. And it took a couple of years for the market to sort of level out where we were at least getting most of the rent. But I would say for about 5, 6, 7 years, we were having to pay on top of whatever the rent was.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was for home ownership essentially ended up being quite a burden in my experience. At 25 to have this $365,000 burden on your shoulders. I mean, it was just a lot.
Okay. So did you offload this house then?
That house got sold last month.
So you held on to it for a while.
Part of it was because we had to. Again, like how much of a loss did we want to sort of absorb and going back and forth on that. And then the constant promise of quote unquote gentrification and things increasing in value and whatever that means.
Did any of that happen?
Yes, it happened. But when you get a really bad loan, some of that is all for naught, right? Because what the payment ended up being after the 10 years didn't balance out relative to what the market had done. So it ended up being, there was money made, but hardly as much as all the heartache and the headache of carrying this thing for the past 10, 12 years. Yeah. So it's hard lessons.
Preaching over here, girl. Like,
yeah,
someone knows your pain.
It's hard lessons. You think you're doing well, especially like with people of color. Home ownership is like the golden egg of making it. It's what you strive for, especially as immigrants. that was it. My mom would talk to her friends about it. She was so proud. The fact that I went to Duke was nice and cool, but the fact that I had a home.
She's like, look at my baby. Right. And I think too, we often think of financial mistakes as something like making it rain in the club or YOLOing or, racking up credit card debt and this frivolous spending. We do know that that exists, but a lot of times the financial mistakes come from thinking that we're doing something good, but not having enough information to realize that it's not what's in our best interest in the moment. And people really take for granted a lot of people being out there trying to do what's best and trying to get a leg up and trying to reach their full potential or to elevate themselves, but just not having the information and the knowledge to be able to make those decisions, finding out that it is in fact a mistake. And then like the shame of the mistake being something that you want to hide and you don't want to tell people about. And then it starts this whole new set of financial problems because you won't tell anybody you screwed it all up and you need help. What's the best way to get out of this situation?
Exactly right.
And that's why I think like discussion is so important around these money topics.
No, totally. Part of it was feeling like a failure with the home because in my head, that was what you did with money. You accrued enough money to be able to buy a home. And then the home essentially is what guaranteed future security down the road when you retired or got older. Like that was the key.
Right.
And so when that proved not to be the case in my case, I was like, okay, now what am I supposed to do with this money? I had no idea that there's all these other options to build up financial security and wealth over time. Even at this point, I'm probably 28, 29 and still quite ignorant to. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until I was about 28 where I started like, oh, I should probably pour into my 401k now.
Right.
And then understanding what it meant to start 7 years later than recommended and how much money was lost at that point.
Right. The tax savings missed.
Tax savings and the compounded interest. Again, all of that, I was completely unfamiliar.
All right. So talk to us a little bit about where you are now, what you're doing.
Eventually, it wasn't all grim and doom and gloom, right? I eventually started making halfway decent money once I'd graduated from grad school, and probably 3 years out of grad school is when I started to hit six figures. That was interesting too, because again, that becomes like the gold standards, like you've made it when you start making them six figures. No one talks about Biggie was onto something with the more money, more problems. That's all it was. It never seemed to be enough.
Yes.
This is when my relationship with money shifted. It was like, well, if I just had some X amount more, 6 months later when I got it, everything was fabulous. And then 6 months after that, man, if I just had another 25,000 things, and then you get it. And it was hilarious. It was like, what is happening? My savings weren't changing. It was like, what is going on? Why do I feel like I'm still living paycheck to paycheck, even though I'm making more money than my parents combined? What's going on? Mm-hmm. And so you asked where I was now. I recently quit my job, a job that I was getting paid pretty good money for.
Right. But you found the six-figure job, but it didn't do it for you.
It wasn't doing it. And it was around about this of what I knew that I wanted to sort of freelance, which is what I'm doing now. But I was scared as shit because I didn't feel like I had the right amount of savings. My savings were abysmal, borderline non-existent. And I'm now mid-30s. And I realized I needed help. What am I doing? Like, I want to quit my job. I don't have the 6 months savings set up. I need some help. And so I wanted to speak to someone that I trusted. And so a friend introduced me to a friend that worked at Goldman and was very sort of financially savvy. I finally bit the bullet and spent a couple $100 to get some of his time and like, help me, what am I going to do? And it's bearing your soul like that. I was embarrassed. I was deeply, deeply embarrassed to be at this age, making the kind of money I was making and not having anything to show for it. But you got to start somewhere. That was where I was at. I was like, all right, just tell me what to do. And that really, really opened my eyes. And I promise you that conversation happened earlier this year. Was the first time I met Justin, and we sat and went through my finances and he gave me a plan. You know, it was hard. I'm sitting here like, okay, so let's talk about investing. I really ever talk, and he's like, ma'am, let's go ahead and look at this debt
Right.
situation going on. Baby steps, baby steps.
Mm-hmm.
But having that guidance was one, acknowledging the fact that I don't have to know it all. There are people who do know more than you, and that is okay to tap into their resources.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was a big thing, right? Hey, I'm a smart person. I should be able to figure this out. And
because everybody's got money and everybody's got to make money. And so like, why do I need a money professional? Because we all got stuff to do with our money. Right.
I can figure it out. I can read. I can learn. And it was like, no, there is just a lot of stuff and intricacies to this thing that it's okay to seek help and just being on it. Yeah. So that was a big thing for me, just seeking help.
That is awesome. The fact that it was, like you said, just months ago that you found someone and that you're starting that path to creating a strong financial foundation and getting ready to move forward. So kind of give us an overview of the things that are in your plan.
Sure.
To change the situation and get you on track.
So like I said, I'm freelancing now. Mm-hmm. I worked in advertising and I still do, and I freelance to pay my bills, but I have a bunch of business ventures on the side that I'm trying to now commit to. So from an income standpoint, I'm trying to do a 50-50 split, 50% freelancing to make enough money so I can survive, so that I can actually build my business and explore these ventures. What that means for me is being super disciplined with my budget. This past year, it was almost a year ago now, I actually downsized my apartment, moved into a studio. Anyone lives in New York, that's humble living, 400 square feet. But again, I ended up saving $900 a month on rent. It's what you got to do. I was very aggressive about trying to pay down my credit cards this past year.
Right.
So I really am working with very minimal debt outside of my student loans. I sold the house again. So one less thing I'm now responsible for.
Yeah, simplifying life.
Just simplifying, super simplifying, living within my means. It's a really big thing. And my savings are in a good place, but saving with intention. And some of the advice I've gotten is and student loans, like we were saying, is like really the big one debt that I have that's over my head, that I'm in the next 12 to 18 months, I'm really looking to bang out so that everything that I earn is mine in real life.
So talk about the confidence shift. We talked about, like you said, going from a bigger place to a smaller place and like starting to really knock down this debt, et cetera. Like you still have a roof over the head, even though you have a smaller place. Sometimes that's the biggest thing for people is like, I really want to make a change, but I'm afraid. How did you get over that idea of, oh, I'm not going to be comfortable in this studio apartment, or, oh, somebody might know I took them over my house last year and now I'm taking them over here. And they're like, ooh, what's going on with Claudia's finances? Or where did you get the confidence to be able to like, this is it and this is good for me?
You get to a point where it's like this is my life. It's my life. It's not my friends' lives. It's not my people's lives. It's not my Facebook followers. This is real life.
Not the extra $900 they got to put for that bigger apartment.
And that's the part where I was like, I stopped and I was like, Claudia, you're paying $900 extra a month for a room that someone may stay in twice a year.
Mm-hmm.
Really, you have a visitor that stays over $900 a month.
Right. You could get them a hotel room for that weekend and still be good.
I was like, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. I was like, first of all, this is New York. First of all, people have roommates until that. Like, get over yourself. Like this idea of what you're supposed to be or what you're supposed to have, it's made up. It's all made up. All you have to do is peel back a layer or two and realize most people's stories are not the truth. I was like, Claude, this is my journey. This is me. I'm 35, just getting my life together. And that is okay. That is better now. In my head, I was like, I still have enough time to, when I hit my 50s, to be in a much better place, right? So face the music, acknowledge where you're at right now, and take the steps that you can. It's really just been that simple. It was like just being super honest and candid with myself, acknowledging that I didn't want to continue living this way. And I wanted to try and secure a future that was better than the struggles, even just watching my parents and things like that, as they sort of knock on retirement years and the realities that they're facing them. I don't want it to be that difficult.
Right.
Yeah, it was really just about kind of flipping the bird to everybody else and the appearances and doing what I thought was best for me.
Yes. And now you are on the road. Yes.
I am so excited about it. I am so excited about it. Freelance has turned out to be better than I ever thought it would be. I'm in a situation where I'm making almost as much money I was making full time, working half the time. A situation I never thought would be possible.
You just got to find the opportunities. Yeah.
You just have to find the opportunities. Being super disciplined. When I sold my home, I didn't make a lot of money off of it, but whatever I did make, I took 90% of it and paid on my loans. I was like, you know what?
This going to this debt.
Hey,
like.
Go ahead. Pimp
Right.
Sally, go ahead and take that, hold that. Because I really am committed to like just being free financially. That's really a really big thing for me right now. It feels good to just see the progress.
This story has been amazing. I am just excited and inspired by you, the story, your commitment to it all, your transparency, because I feel like there are so many of us in the same situation where they've experienced at least one, if not more, 4 or 5 of the things that you discussed. And the biggest thing you can do for yourself is have that mindset shift to say, okay, enough is enough.
Yeah.
I am done focusing on the obstacles that are in my way. I'm going to look at the opportunities. I am going to put my big girl panties on and say, enough. I'm going to get this together because it's not too late and I need to start now.
Yeah, completely right. And I think one of the last things I'll leave was like, there was a mentality shift, right? Like, I think so much of it is like, we're in a space of scarcity. Like, we don't have enough. We don't have enough, right? Mm-hmm. Versus if you focus on what you do have. I have so much. Like, I don't go without food. If I really and truly wanted to get something frivolous, I can. I travel. Like, it wasn't about like completely robbing myself of everything that I love, but being super responsible. It's like, hey, well, look, if you pay off this credit card, then you could maybe treat yourself to that trip because you'll have enough cash to pay for it outright. It was just finding the right balance and appreciating what I do have. And I do have a lot. Versus so much focus on what we don't have.
Right.
So much of it is based on comparison in the first place. And once I was able to sort of make that mental shift, I think it's really helped keep me on the straight and narrow.
Yeah. This has been really great. So we usually wrap up with what I call the final sprint.
Okay.
I'm just going to super rapid fire some questions at you.
Cool. I'm with it.
So the first one is, finish this sentence. That awkward financial moment when?
I can't think of a really bad one.
Okay.
I can't. Okay. I can't.
All right. So something you do for fun that does not cost anything.
It costs a little something.
Okay.
But I take dance classes.
So
I never grew up being a dancer. And I watched enough YouTube videos once. I was like, I could do that. And so that's my treat. It's $20 a week, but it really brings so much joy to my life that I think it's worth that. But it's not insane.
Right. All right. Best advice you've ever received?
Financially?
Any kind of advice.
Or anything. This applies to so much, but you have to dig in to dig out.
Ooh, I like it.
Someone gave me that advice when I lived in Japan and I was having a really, really hard time. And they were like, you've got to dig in to dig out and like really go all in. And I think that applies to so much in life. Like, it wasn't until I really dug into my finances that I've been able to dig myself out of the holes. Yeah. And I think it's great advice that applies to many different aspects of life.
Yes. I love it. All right. Last but not least, could you tell us one thing that you would like to improve about your finances in the upcoming year?
Yes. Consistency.
What's the action item to help you achieve
my consistency? I think maybe just sticking to my budget. Sometimes I have a tendency, like if things are going really well or I have a really good month, right, to then get a little lax. But in my line of work, there are ebbs and flows like shit. I can have a really good one month and then not so good month. And so just being disciplined and sticking to my budget, even on good months, I think is where I'd like to tighten up for 2019.
That is awesome. Claudia, thank you so much. We have made it through the final sprint. You are standing on the podium. You have won the worth listening Olympics. You're now a medalist. You're standing on the podium and it's your time to shine. So go ahead, shout yourself out. Tell us how we can support you, what you're up to, all that stuff that we want to know about you and how we can continue to follow you.
Wonderful. I am a person with many talents. I am a brand strategist, creative strategist. That's my experience for the past decade. But I'm also an interior designer. My company's name is NW10, as in Northwest 10, interiors.com. That's the zip code of where I grew up in London, what you know. And I really love working with creative professionals. It's really important for me for people to have spaces that actually reflect who they are and actually make them better people. I think we as people really underestimate just how much space and our environments affect our well-being, our health, our productivity, our creativity. And that's a big part of my ethos, to just bring that out. You guys can't see it, but Lauren can see. I've got images of Biggie and Tupac, some of the greatest, in my apartment. And again, I just love infusing culture and personality into spaces. So check me out. I am on Instagram at NW10Interiors. And I have the website, similar name, NW10Interiors.com. And 2019 is really about developing a product to democratize design and bring interior design to the rental space. So stay tuned for that. I'm super excited.
Hey.
If you don't see me on Shark Tank in 2019, it's coming. That's the plan. But I'm really, really excited about developing a new app in service of that idea. Stretching my entrepreneurial wings, trying new things, trying to build new businesses and multiple revenue streams. So yeah, look out for me.
Awesome. Claudia, thanks so much for being on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Lauren. It's been great.
I hope you enjoyed listening to Claudia's money memoir. She helped us go out with a bang by being so transparent about the financial decisions she made in life and the consequences that came with them. So many have made similar mistakes and are allowing shame and embarrassment to stop them from making the changes they need to change their life. Claudia reached a point where she realized this is her life, no one else's. The realization empowered her to quit trying to keep up with the Joneses and start making changes she needed to make in order to get her finances turned around. I want to end this year with the word of the day that sums it all up: financial literacy. Investopedia says financial literacy is education and understanding of various financial areas, including topics related to managing personal finance, money, and investing. So that means just knowing stuff about money. But I want to stress to you that you don't have to become an expert in the world of finances in order to become literate. And you don't have to be an expert in order to succeed. Claudia shared with us that earlier this year, she invested some of her time and her money into meeting someone that helped her develop a plan for her finances. I believe it's important for you personally to know what you're doing with your finances and why. But it's also okay to ask someone else to help you out. You can't do all things, nor can you know all things. So it's important that we admit what we don't know and then go find someone that does. The difference between success and failure in finances is strategy. If you're struggling to create a strategy that works for your finances, reach out for help. Thanks for tuning in today. We hope you found this episode worth listening to. And as always, if you have financial questions, suggestions for guests, or would like to share your money memoir in 2019, please contact us through our website, worth-listening.com. Oh, okay. Sorry. I hope you enjoyed listening to Claudia's money memoir. She helped us go out with a bang in 2018 by being so transparent about the decisions. I hope you enjoyed listening to Claudia's money memoir. She helped us go out with a bang by being so transparent about the financial decisions she made in life and the consequences that came with them. So many have made similar mistakes and are allowing shame and embarrassment to stop them from making the changes they need to change their life. Claudia reached a point where she realized this is her life, no one else's. The realization empowered her to quit trying to keep up with the Joneses and start making changes she needed to make in order to get her finances turned around. Our word of the day. Our word of the day is financial literacy. I want to end this year with a word of the day that sums it all up. Oh, damn. I want to end this year with the word of the day that sums it all up. Financial literacy. Investopedia says financial literacy is education and understanding of various financial areas, including topics related to managing personal finance, money, and investing. So that means just knowing stuff about money. But I want to stress to you that you don't have to become an expert in the world of finances in order to become literate. And you don't have to be an expert in order to succeed. Claudia shared with us that earlier this year, she invested some of her time and her money into meeting someone that helped her develop a plan for her finances. I believe it's important that you know what you're doing. I believe it's important that you know what you're doing with your finances and why. And it's okay to ask some. I believe it's important for you personally to know what you're doing with your finances and why. But it's also okay to ask someone else to help you out. You can't do all things, nor can you know all things. So it's important that we admit what we don't know and then go find someone that does. The difference between success and failure in finances is strategy. If you're struggling to create a strategy that works for your finances, reach out for help. Thanks for tuning in today. We hope you found this episode worth listening to. And as always, if you have financial questions, suggestions for guests, or would like to share your money memoir in 2019, please contact us through our website, worth-listening.com.